So in this video I'm going to show you how to restore lead acid batteries, and it's going to be quite long, unfortunately. But over here I'll put 3 links for the first part, the second part, and the third part. This is like desulfating, this is of charging, and this is filling the cells with acid, so you can jump through it in case you just don't want to watch the entire video, because this is going to be like, what, 23 minutes long? I don't know. It's one of my longest videos. But anyway, yeah, here it is. Well, looky what I got. 5 dead batteries. Now these are from a friend of mine that is a big time scrapper. He just scraps a bunch of metal and stuff like that, and he comes across a lot of batteries. And so he started giving me just a bunch of batteries. He started dumping them in my front yard, and I'll fix them up. I'll give back most of them to him. I'll keep a couple of them. Or he said that I'll give them all back, and he'll find me some really big like boat batteries, like deep cycle batteries. Either way, it doesn't take me that much to fix these, so let's see how much damage these are and which ones can be fixed. First off, what we want to do is we want to see how much voltage these batteries have, because voltage, although batteries can trick you, like this one could be 12 volts, and then right when you try to pull power from it, it dips down to 0 volts. But usually the voltage can give you some clues. Like that is 0.4 of a volt, very dead. I don't know if I'll be able to fix that one. 5.74 volts, 4.8 volts, 10.41. Now that one, I reckon that one could probably be fixed pretty easily. 5.71 volts. These 3 ones are at 5 volts, and so I don't know for sure if they'll be able to be fixed. This one's at 10.4. That one looks like it might be able to be fixed pretty easily, and this one, I don't know, that's 1 volt. But we'll have to see. And now what we have to do is we have to make sure there's enough water inside of the cell, inside of each cell, because the thing that happens is the acid is 10% sulfuric acid and 90% water, and the water always is electrolyzed, and it leaves the battery as vapor, so you only have to fill it back up with water. I'm using distilled water, but that's just because I don't want to break his batteries. But on all my batteries I just use regular tap water, so it doesn't really matter. Now on these somewhat transparent batteries, you can see the cells a little bit. Like that one's a little lighter, so that means there's no acid in that cell. This one, the acid is up to here. The acid should always be up to here, or covering the plates. So now what we have to do is we have to open up the cells and add more water to them if they need it. Now keep in mind there are several different ways to open a lead acid battery. Like for instance, we have these. This is a regular car battery. This has these tops that you pop off very easily, and you can access each one of the cells. You can see inside of there. Then we have our sealed lead acid battery, which you pop these little caps off, and underneath is a little one-way valve that lets pressure leave, but it doesn't let stuff get back in. That's probably what this one has. And then we have these. These are a screw type. You unscrew them, and they pop out. Oh, or I guess they're just little unthreaded ones. Never mind. I thought they were screwed. And I'd never seen these ones before. It's like a ribbon of little caps. So that's interesting. And this one, I believe you just have to undo the sticker to get to the... yeah. See, right here is the... I'll just stick this on the back. And what you do with these is you would pop these open. But these are really hard to open, so it takes a little while. And then once again, these are probably the screw... I don't know, maybe they're a screw type, or maybe they're... Oh yeah, they're just that. My other batteries had little screw type ones, but oh well. But yeah, that's the most common ways, things that you'll find in order to open up a battery. So now we can obviously tell that we need liquid in that one. You can see that most of the plates aren't covered by acid, so that's not good. When all the plates covered. Might be able to see a little bit of liquid coming up there. Oh, yep, it went up there now. It doesn't take a whole lot of liquid to fill one up. Okay, now that all the cells are filled, let's try to charge it. Now you notice even at 1 amp of charge current, the voltage is going up really high because it's taking a big voltage difference in order to push 1 amp of current, because this battery is being really resistive right now. And actually, as the battery kind of, I don't know, kind of seasons or whatever you call it, it starts holding more energy. The voltage will actually go down because it'll be more conductive. It'll start taking the energy more. But we'll let that go while we work on this one. So now let's try to open this one up. That is a nasty design. I hate that. But we got it open now. It looks like this one's full of liquid. Wouldn't be too hard to fill up though. There we go. I just connected this up to the other battery with little jumpers, and I figure I'll probably connect them all together because, to be honest, usually it can take like 8 hours or even a day and a half to get a battery to be to have capacity. Well, unfortunately, I can't figure out how to open up this one. I got all the other ones working and they're all charging in parallel, but I can't get the caps out of this one. And luckily, this is an absorbed glass mat, meaning there is no freestanding acid in this one. So it's all the acid is stuck inside of a spongy material. So at least I don't have to worry about tipping it over. But I think I'm gonna just drill through these caps and then rip them out somehow. Because I think I have some extra caps from another battery that I was gonna junk, and I could always try to fit those in there, or just put a piece of tape over it. In the end, this is a junk battery, so the guy can't complain if I fix it and it doesn't have any caps in it. Now inside this battery, there is no freestanding acid, like I said, and you can see some in between the plates, like especially right there, is one big like spongy material that goes in between the plates that holds the acid. And now what I'm going to do is fill this battery up with water, even though it's not meant to have freestanding liquid inside of it. It's okay. Dump a bit back in there. And there we go. Now the battery is filled up with water, and we'll try to charge it now. Turn off this. This entire system's going to 9.3 volts, so it's a little bit more than it was before. Anyway. Let's see if it works, because before it wouldn't detect it as a battery. Hey! That's a big difference. That's a very, very big difference. Before, because see, before, it wouldn't, I mean, as soon as the charger tried to charge it, there was so high resistance, or no amount of energy going through this, that the voltage would go up to like 25 volts, and it would recognize it as there's no battery connected, and so it would turn off. Now here's a good example of an absorbed glass mat battery, or AGM battery. You can see it on this plate. It's gray lead, just solid lead, and then you have these white strips of a spongy material that holds acid, and then you have the other plates that have the brown lead dioxide, which is the negative plate. So the pure lead is the positive, and the lead dioxide is the negative, which I think lead dioxide is the most poisonous form of lead, but oh well. But yeah, that's the pads. So even though I emptied this battery out, it still has a bunch of acid that's been soaked into the foam or whatever, the glass mats in between the plates. Blah. I've been charging the battery at 15 amps at the maximum setting, and it's gotten up to 12.4 volts, which is pretty nice. And now let's do the load test. I mean, of course, you'd want to let it sit for a long time before I actually got the real voltage, because it now has a residual surface charge from the charger. But oh well, let's test it out. And under the 1.8 amp light bulb, it drops down to 12.2 volts. That's not bad at all. 12.1, oh whatever. I mean, it's a work in progress. It's really awesome. So that battery, that's very promising. So these batteries, all 5 of them, have been charging at 5 amps for about an hour now. And let's see, let's just see this battery, this one. It's reading 12.6 volts right now. And by doing that, the voltage doesn't really dip very much at all. I charged this one a lot, and it's getting really hot, and it's still only maxing out at like 10.5 volts or so. This one's like 9 volts, and that one's like 8.5 or whatever, so these ones are really sad. But this one, that one, it's still at 12.7 volts, at 12.67 on the multimeter. It doesn't drop down too far. That's pretty nice. It could use a little bit of desulfating, but that's really, really nice looking. Awesome. Now this one is really sad. After that hour of charging, the charger no longer detects it, so that means it doesn't have enough. It has really high resistance for some reason, so that's odd. So let's connect it to my universal DC power supply so we can measure the milliamps of current going into it. Now it'll probably settle down to like 10 milliamps or so, but then it'll slowly go back up over time. Now after a full day of charging, at 12.4 volts it only pulls 100 milliamps of current, which is really good. Like if we bring the voltage up, it maxes out the meter at 14 or so volts. Let's switch it over to 15, or let's 5 amps through. Yeah, and it pulls like 3 amps if you try to bring it up to the voltage I was charging it at before. So that's very, very conductive. It likes to eat up the electricity now. And after about 2 hours of sitting, it only settles down to 11.8 volts. That's very, very, very promising. I'm really happy for you. Good little battery. We're gonna do a little experiment. The microphone is on the top of my camera, and I'm going to bring the voltage up above like 14 volts. You should hear the sizzling sound of the cells. That's the sound of the water and the acid electrolyzing and turning into hydrogen and oxygen and bubbling up. That really happens if you bring the voltage over like 13.5 volts. But if you keep the battery voltage below 13.5, like the charging voltage or whatever, you won't really lose much acid. So that's cool. So now we have this battery, and it's holding about 11.7 volts whenever it's settled down for like a day or so. Right now it's at 12.3. But how do we bring that voltage up, and how do we get it more capacity? Well, let's ask another question. Why do batteries lose capacity? Well, other than them shorting out cells, most of the issues with batteries is a thin layer of lead sulfate builds up in between the plates, because the whole process of lead acid batteries relies on the lead and the sulfuric acid bonding together to make lead sulfate. But sometimes that sulfate forms crystals, and as most of us know, crystalline structures have different properties, and so those crystals can be harder to dissolve back into the acid. But one thing you can do is you can use a pulse desulfator or a battery desulfator. Basically, this pulls a little bit of electricity out of the battery, transfers the voltage up a little to a much higher voltage, like 50 or 60 volts. It saves it in some capacitors, like those two capacitors right there, and it feeds that high voltage little pulse back into the battery. It does that several thousand times a second, and that high voltage pulse, those high voltage pulses are capable of helping to dissolve that layer of lead sulfate back into the acid, and putting the lead from the lead sulfate back onto the lead plates. So you get your reactive chemistry back, and it's really simple to use. You just plug them up like this. See the little green LED is on. Now the thing is, this desulfator uses electricity. It uses 80 milliamps of current, and so that might not be much, but if you have an extremely dead battery, that could run your battery dead overnight, and that could do more damage and just revert it back to a totally dead state. So you'd be back at square one. So what I've found is a good thing is to connect your battery in parallel with a good battery that will keep the voltage up. It might waste some electricity, but you can always check on it and charge it every day. And that's actually the main reason why I started building my off-grid battery system. Right now I don't have any solar panels that could feed power into it, so if I pull power out of it, well then I have to bring my charger out here and charge the batteries. But it works great for maintaining and securing my batteries, because like all these batteries, they're all being desulfated at once by this desulfator. They're all connected in parallel, so it's one big 12-volt system, and the electrical pulses from this desulfator are feeding all through the wires and keeping these batteries at tip-top shape, all the while still finishing desulfating this battery. I got this one for $2 at a yard sale, and it would max out at 11.7 volts, and like 2 or 3 weeks later, after desulfating on the system, it'll max out at 12.45 volts. So that's pretty awesome. Now we'll connect this battery, which whenever this battery is fed with 12.7 volts, it takes 100 milliamps of current. So this battery system could last maybe a month or more by having a 100 milliamp draw. So the thing is, I could forget about it and it would still be perfectly fine. All the while, it's being desulfated too by the battery desulfator. So probably within a week, I'll notice a big voltage change. And yes, I know I'm using very thin wire, but once again, I'm not actually pulling much power from this system. It's only meant to keep the voltage up over them all. So, in the meantime, until I get to my part 2 video of my off-grid shed system, well, these little jumpers will do just fine. And now the story restarts back for the other battery. We'll connect it up to power supply and feed it with about 15 volts, and we'll let that sit for a little while. And as you can see, it's even now going up slowly and surely. It's at 94 milliamps that it's pulling, and it'll probably go up to 95 within a couple seconds. See? It's been on this for about 4 or 5 hours now, and the current going through the battery has raised a lot, but it's jumping around a lot too, so that's interesting. None of the cells seem to be fizzing or bubbling too much though, so it might not have a shorted cell. It might just need to sit on there a little bit longer, so I'll let it go a little longer. Well, this one's been charging for about 2 days now, and at 12.5 volts it only pulls 80 milliamps of current, which is great, and bring the voltage up, it goes up really high, so it's very conductive now. So we'll let that one sit to see what voltage it gets to, and then we'll introduce this one and start bringing this one back up too. It's at 5.6 volts. We'll bring it up to 12.7. Oh wow, this one's a lot more conductive than the other one, so this one might go better. Let's see how many amps it pulls at 15. Nice. I'll let it sit at that for a little bit, and I'll slowly lower the voltage as the amperage starts to go up. After about a half an hour, the battery's only gone down to 11.92. That's really good. Let's take this and hook it up to the battery pack and desulfate it. Well, unfortunately, it's now like 0 degrees Fahrenheit outside, so I don't want my batteries freezing, so I moved them to my basement. And we're just using the deep cycle battery right now, just to keep the other batteries, their voltage up. And we added this one to the bunch, and this one's already being desulfated. And so they're both being desulfated now, and let's see how they go. Well, unfortunately, this battery's been charging for 4 days, and I think it's just shorted out, because if you bring the voltage up, and also whenever you let it sit for a couple minutes, it already goes back down to like 8.9 volts. Bring the voltage up, even at 11 volts, it's pulling 200 milliamps, which is a lot. And I think it's basically just shorted out. Let's go check on the other battery though, because it's actually already, the other battery's been desulfating for an entire week now, so let's check that one out. Okay, so we've had this one desulfating for a while now. Let's take it upstairs and test it. So after about a half hour, the battery settled down to 12.35 volts. I suspect it's not fully charged, so we'll test that later. But right now we have a 12 volt fan that pulls 220 milliamps, so that's 1/5 of an amp of current. And we'll watch how the voltage goes down. I don't think it'll really go below 12 volts with this, so that's good. After a little bit, the voltage has come back up to 12.22 volts. So let's try a 1.8 amp load. It's quite a big current for such a small battery, to be honest. 11.55 volts-ish. That's what I predicted it would go down to. But, or actually, maybe it'll probably stop at 11.58. Never mind. Now let's charge the battery with 12.7 volts for a little bit, just to make sure it has the optimum charge, and we'll see after that what the voltage drops to. And also, we'll see how low the the current goes, because if the battery is capable of reaching 12.7 volts, then it should be able to sit exactly level with the power supply, and thus not pull any power from the power supply, or at least not much power. So I changed it to charging at 13 volts, and it's only pulling 29 milliamps of current. Not a lot. Bring the voltage down and see where the voltage settles to after about an hour or so. And so now after 2 hours, the battery is settled down to 12.35 volts, and that's pretty awesome, because that really means that the desulfator is raising the voltage and raising the capacity too. So I'm pretty happy with this. It's not fully desulfated yet, but I'll put it back on the desulfator and just let it keep fixing itself. So currently this is my best method for restoring lead acid batteries. If this doesn't work on your battery, try epsom salt, and then I don't know what to say after that. Maybe get a new one. But I'm sorry the video was pretty long and pretty drawn out too. It's hard to capture this long process and put all the information into a short video. It kind of has to be kind of a documentary length video. But I had a lot of fun with this, and I hope you enjoyed it and learned something from it. And thanks for watching. See you later.